Hi, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. It's a long day. It's been an incredible conference. I'm here to speak to you about, I'm really lucky to be doing this research, research with psilocybin, the psychedelic or hallucinogenic compound in magic mushrooms, to help people who are dying, and we don't die well in America, who are dying with severe existential and psychospiritual distress. We're doing government-approved clinical research using psilocybin to facilitate this incredible mystical experience that we're going to talk about to help those who are at the end of life with cancer. How many people here knew that this was happening in America, psychedelic research? Wow. How many people knew that in the 50s and 60s there was a large body of scientific literature on the applications of LSD and psilocybin? Wow, that's a hip crowd. So I called Daniel a month or two ago, and I said, I'm looking forward to coming here, but I have to say, I'm looking at this incredible list of speakers and the incredible topics, discoveries and robotics and AI and gadgets and mechanisms to facilitate healing and advance medicine and prolong our species' longevity. I said, Daniel, I have nothing new to offer. I have no discoveries. What our research talks about is the infinite wisdom within consciousness, within us, unlocked, unleashed, or triggered by this incredible compound called psilocybin. I want to start with some quotes from some people in our study. These are participants who took place in our clinical trial who had cancer. Many had advanced cancer, and some of these people have since passed away. These are their words, verbatim words, about their experience in our trial, in the days, weeks, and months up to a year following their participation. This changed my life. I can't even imagine it, the fear of cancer. It's hard to describe the changes, but I feel more contented and happy about my place in the world and all the things I'm doing. I felt this constant state of becoming. I felt gratitude like I never felt before. I felt totally welcome. Death doesn't matter. I'm less afraid of death. Death is part of life. Right now, I have no fear of recurrence of cancer. It doesn't enter my mind. That from a woman who was in remission, but was crippled with fear of a recurrence of her ovarian cancer. Something else I experienced was the feeling that one is eternal, that all of existence happens in every moment. There wasn't a part of this experience that isn't love, all love, and everything is love. We'll talk about love a little later on today. Many of you have seen some of the press on the research. There's been a lot of press, and this was a very good article in the New Yorker last year. And the good thing about this piece that Michael Pollan did was separate, tease out the cultural frenzy and sensationalism of the 60s psychedelic counterculture or culture with the scientific contributions these medicines are making. These are meaning-making compounds. And they're not really drug studies per se. Most drugs you're taking, your Ativan, your Prozac, your blood pressure medicine today, it works while it's in your body. They take this medicine once, have one session, but it's a transformative experience that is sustained and recalibrates how they die, which is quite incredible to witness. So what is psilocybin? It's a naturally occurring compound in many species of mushrooms, been used for millennia by religious and indigenous cultures for insight and transformation. It works at the serotonergic receptors, primary receptors. I won't go deep into the neuroscience today. There's a great history. It's been around for millennia in the Mayan culture for rituals. There's evidence in ancient Greece and the Eleusinian mysteries that there was an ergot alkaloid similar to psilocybin or LSD that was used for transformation and insight. And it came to America in an interesting way. In 1957, Gordon Wasson, a banker at J.P. Morgan and an amateur ethnomycologist, goes to Mexico and meets a healer named Maria Sabina. He takes part in a mushroom ceremony. And this is an actual picture of him at the ceremony. Has an incredible spiritual awakening and opening of his heart. Comes back and writes this great article for Life magazine. Now, some of you who are older, like me, will recognize the gentleman here. Who's he? Bert Lahr, the lion from The Wizard of Oz. A lot of people read this article, got a lot of attention, including from Timothy Leary and others. And Albert Hofmann became aware of this. He had already synthesized LSD for clinical applications, and they soon synthesized psilocybin for medical and clinical applications, and the research began with psilocybin. It's a long history, way too long for 20 minutes. But briefly, many people don't know. There was a large body of literature in the 50s and 60s looking at psilocybin and psychedelics for end of life and other applications. 40,000 research subjects, 1,000 clinical and research reports. And the mid-60s social-cultural changes, the indiscriminate use led to the termination of funding. In 1970, by an act of Congress, all the research came to a halt, which is an incredibly tough ending for a lot of promising developments. Some of those developments were helping understand and relieve existential distress in people dying at the end of life, treating addiction and alcoholism, and helping us understand consciousness. What is consciousness? And now, 30, 40 years later, research resumes at UCLA, Johns Hopkins, and NYU, where I am, with psilocybin. Abraham Maslow, the great psychologist, said, to the extent that all mystical or peak experiences are the same in their essence, have always been the same, all religions are the same in their essence and have always been the same. There's something common we may call the core religious experience. Albert Einstein, who I think was a modern mystic, said, the most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. So what is a mystical experience? These are the criteria we use today at all the sites around the country for psilocybin research. It's the same criteria used back in the 60s and 50s. And these are items, criteria gleaned from naturally occurring mystical experiences that are found throughout millennia. So the mystic core of all religions is the same. Unity, a strong sense of interconnectedness of all people and things, all is one, achieved through self-transcendence. The noetic quality, coined by William James, a profound sense of insight and encountering ultimate reality. Sacredness, an intuitive response of awe, humility, holiness. Deeply felt positive mood, joy, blessedness, peace, and love. People often, and I'll describe the protocol in a few minutes, are lying on the couch, having the experience, tears coming down their face of the complete love and joy they're experiencing, and some difficult stretches when you're looking at the end of your life. Ineffability, impossible to describe. Words fall short. And importantly, transcendence. This is a profound, important factor in psychedelic or mystical experience. This sense of timelessness, transcending past, present, and future, transcending this body, transcending time, space as we know it. Some people report transcending the boundaries of birth and death, peeking into the infinite. Quite incredible for a scientist to be observing this. And Albert Einstein again, people like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. And Kubler-Ross and other end-of-life healers and writers said healing is the personal experience of the transcendence of suffering. How do you want to die? I won't ask you guys today, but when I ask that question, it's the same answer. At home, with loved ones, people who love me, with integrity, with dignity and peace, looking back at a life, hopefully well-lived, but life is tough. It's not how we die in America. That's how we die in America. Most people die in ICUs and in the wrong place. Death and dying has become medicalized. It's become medicalized when it's a natural cycle of existence. It's the greatest taboo. We don't speak about it. We don't speak about it in medical schools. We don't speak about it in training. Palliative care has made a lot of great advances in the last 10, 15 years. We have a long way to go. I work in palliative care, people at the end of life, and it's just not talked about in the culture. We're better at chemotherapies, we're better at pain control, but we have a paucity of meaning-making approaches to help the end-of-life distress, what these compounds are. We don't die well in America. Despite polls that 90% of people who are end-of-life want to die at home, most don't. Most die in what we call bad deaths, not good deaths, marked by needless suffering, surrounded by medical equipment, like the gentleman you saw. Every health regulatory organization, including the World Health Organization, has called out for better measures at addressing end-of-life distress, end-of-life depression, end-of-life existential angst. In 1997, Institute of Medicine called out for a change in how we treat people at the end of life in terms of their emotional quality. And sadly, last year, a study showed that depression in the final year of life has increased by 26%. And people die what's called demoralization syndrome. Hopelessness, meaninglessness, existential distress are the core phenomena. And Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor who developed the psychotherapy called logotherapy. Who here has heard of Viktor Frankl? It's great. Oh, fantastic. Meaning can be found in life literally up to the last moment, up to the last breath, even in the face of death. And finally, before I get to our study, Aldous Huxley. He I consider the godfather of our research. He wasn't a scientist. He was a great literary hero, a writer. He wrote The Doors of Perception, which you all know, of course, 1953, based on a 53 experience of mescaline. But he was very committed to helping people die with these mystical experiences, with these profound spiritual openings. And he wrote about it and spoke about it. And he said the living can do a great deal to make the passage easier for the dying. I love this photograph. This is an actual photograph of Aldous Huxley in 1953 on his first mescaline trip in Los Angeles. He was given the drug by a psychiatrist, Dr. Osmond from Canada. I love this for its historical value, obviously, but also for only an English, literary, classy, elegant writer would come to his first psychedelic trip with a tweed jacket, nice trousers, very well dressed. Very classy stuff, and you got to respect him for that. An incredible person, by the way. So our study. This is a U.S. government FDA, DEA-approved, double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial. We just completed it, and we're about to publish some incredible findings showing a rapid reduction in depression, anxiety, and other measures that I'll speak about. We looked into the effectiveness of one psilocybin dose with people with existential and psychospiritual distress. And we evaluated the benefits that it may provide in helping people die with less anxiety and with dignity. How does this study work? People are screened carefully, medically and psychiatrically, how to have cancer, how to have a diagnosable serious anxiety response to their cancer and to their status. And we spend 4 weeks in a very intimate setting, working with them, preparing them for the one psilocybin dose. We get to know them quite well, and they get to know us quite well. And trust and rapport is the key factor in minimizing adverse effects. In 2,000 doses in the modern research era, there hasn't been one, what we call in medicine, serious adverse event. You see a lot of that in the street, but the reason why we can prevent those is because it's called set and setting. The set is the mindset of the person, carefully screened and prepared. The setting, how it's done, and intention matters. Why are they doing it? And of course, the medicine matters, and we're getting government-approved psilocybin here in the right dose for the right body weight. We spend 4 weeks getting to know them, preparing them for the dose, hearing about their response to cancer, what they're afraid of, what their intention is, what their life was like. We do a life review, what's meaningful for them. And it's quite an amazing journey. Then they come in for the session. This is the actual room of a day of a session. It's an elegant-looking living room for a hospital setting, right? They're prepared to go into the session with eye shades and headphones, playing gorgeous music for 6 hours. And then encourage them to go into the experience, to accept the unfolding moment-to-moment changes. We're there to speak with them if they need to, but typically they stay in the experience, having an incredibly transformative experience, ideally, what we call a mystical experience. And set and setting is everything. This is not a good set and setting. Ms. Updike, please hold my call for the rest of the afternoon. I've just taken some LSD. What are some implications of this? A change in awareness, how people transform their beliefs about their body, self, death. The experience of cancer can be transformed, no longer be anxiety-provoking as they connect to the transpersonal realm. Increased capacity for appreciation of time living. I'm going to move ahead to our wonderful team. These are some of the outcome measures. There's a lot. The primary variables are depression and anxiety. We looked at forgiveness scales, purpose and life scales, transcendence scales, death anxiety scales. It's a busy-looking chart, but let me try to explain this briefly. This is essentially our depression and anxiety measures. And that green line there is where they took the dose of psilocybin. The pink bar is the psilocybin response, the blue is placebo. And you see in all 6 of these depression and anxiety measures, significant reductions, rapid reductions in depression and anxiety, unseen before in psychiatry at end-of-life patients. Again, depression, response and remission rates for anxiety and depression also dramatically reduced. At 6.5-month follow-up, all the patients who had taken psilocybin by this point after the placebo showed responses up to 80%. 70% of the patients rated the psilocybin experience as the top 5 most meaningful experience of their life, including the single most. 52% rated it the top 5 most spiritually significant experience, including the single most. And almost 90% of people with cancer said their general well-being and life satisfaction had improved. Transcendence is powerfully important. The capacity to transcend the body if the body is dying is an incredible gift to someone with cancer who's dying. If we identify solely with the body as it fades and dies, it brings tremendous anxiety, obviously. But if we connect to something more enduring, something more different than the body that's failing, it's a profound gift, and people experience that. And they talk about love. This is a patient who had the experience a year later after her study. After a while, I began to feel love, just all-encompassing love, and I felt that I was bathed in love. And really, I think the only way to express that in our language is to say you're bathed in God's love. Well, I'm an atheist, but bathed in God's love is not what I want to say, but it's the only way to express the feeling, totally encompassed by love. And I kept that feeling the entire experience, the entire day, and has now a year and a half, 2 years later. I want to briefly discuss a gentleman named Patrick, who I had the honor to work with, who was profiled in the New Yorker article. He was in the mid-50s, had a metastatic cancer, began in the bile duct, very serious. He passed away a year after the study was over. He had an incredible experience that really recalibrated how he died. It was an honor to work with him. I've never seen a death so incredibly beautiful, although he didn't want to leave this earth, nor his lovely wife, but he was not afraid to die. I want to read from his narrative. A bit was in the New Yorker piece. I'm going to read a little more of his journal. From here on, love was the only consideration, describing his experience. Everything that happened, anything and everything that was seen or heard centered on love. It was and is the only purpose. Love seemed to emanate from a single point of light. It was so pure. The sheer joy, the bliss was indescribable. And in fact, there are no words to actually accurately capture my experience, my state, this place. This is a man dying of cancer. I know I've had no earthly pleasure that's ever come close to this feeling, no sensation, no image of beauty. Nothing during my time on earth has felt as pure and joyful and glorious at the height of this journey. I thought about my cancer. At this point, he had mets in his lungs. I took a tour of my lungs. There were nodules there, there were tumors there. But they seemed rather unimportant. I was being told, without words, to not worry about the cancer. It's minor in the scheme of things, simply an imperfection of your humanity. And the more important thing, the real work to be done is before you, love. I had the privilege of seeing him a week before he passed away. I said goodbye to him. I was very shaken up, and I was crying. His wife was tearful. And Patrick looked at me with a grin from ear to ear and just said, everything will be okay. It was an incredible experience. And it shows the possibility of how we can die. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen monk, says, our true nature is the nature of no birth and no death. Only when we touch our true nature can we transcend the fear of non-being, the fear of annihilation. I'm going to run quickly through a new study we're doing with religious leaders. I'm very excited about it, giving psilocybin to religious leaders from all traditions to generate a mystical experience to hopefully facilitate interreligious dialogue and find the common core of religions and mystical experience. And I want to close with some implications of all this research. Improving how we die. Experiences of peace, acceptance, and dignity are possible even with the imminent separation from this life. Future studies in palliative and end-of-life care. We're hoping within the next year to have a phase 3 study, which is multiple sites throughout the states. And if those results are as compelling as these that we're about to publish, the hope is within 10 years, psilocybin can be rescheduled to be used in end-of-life patients. It provides a method to reliably trigger and scientifically study this phenomenology of mystical consciousness. What is this? This incredible state we're wired for, this numinosity that all the mystics have spoke about, that William James spoke about, Carl Jung spoke about. It improves our understanding of the neuroscience, the neurobiology of these incredible states of awareness. There are pro-social and pro-ethical implications. People report in these experiences, we're all connected. We're inseparable, but we're connected. It's an illusion. You and I are separate. We're connected. If we're connected, how do we hurt one another? How do we kill one another? The implications are broad. The treatment of addiction, we're treating alcoholics at NYU, depression, other therapeutic applications. Implications for consciousness research. What is consciousness? Are we wired for meaning? And if so, why? Where is consciousness? Is it generated solely by this complex brain function, or is it outside biology? Is it non-local, as some of the theorists say? Has it always existed? The mystics and our patients talk about tapping into this never-beginning, never-ending consciousness, what the Zen and the Christian and all the mystics talk about. Is it the fabric of the ground of being, the universe? What happens to consciousness upon physical death? What, if anything, is enduring? And we keep hearing the answer is love. That the ground of being and the ground of consciousness may in self be love. In closing, I want to quote Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, who passed away recently. On the way back from the moon, Apollo 14, he had a mystical experience, not by LSD or psilocybin, a naturally occurring peak experience. He described it beautifully. He was in his capsule, and the moon, the sun, the stars were swirling around. And he wrote and dedicated the rest of his life to this research. The biggest joy was on the way home. In my cockpit window, every 2 minutes, the earth, the moon, the sun, and the whole panorama of the heavens. And it was a powerful, overwhelming experience. And suddenly, I realized that the molecules of my body and the molecules of the spacecraft and the molecules in the bodies of my co-astronauts were prototyped, manufactured in some ancient generation of stars. And there was an overwhelming sense of oneness, of connectedness. It wasn't them and us, it was, that's me. That's all of it. It's one thing. It was accompanied by an ecstasy, a sense of, oh my God, wow, yes, and insight and epiphany. So what's he saying? Well, we're all made of the same stuff. Star stuff, divine stuff, secular, religious, pick your language, pick your vernacular. We're made of the same stuff, and the implications are profound. And people who are dying, when they connect with that, it transforms how they experience death and consciousness and what might happen after physical death. I want to close with a quote from Patrick, this gentleman from the New Yorker article. On the day of his session, what turned out to be the psilocybin session, I was blind at the time, but now I know it was a psilocybin session, and it was obvious then as well. It was 2 hours into the study. He's laying on the couch, eye shades, headphones on, and we sit there, 2 monitors, 2 guides, just watching, observing. It's the greatest day of your clinical practice. You do very little. On the best days, you do nothing. You have this experience, and we just witness this incredible phenomenon. If they need help, they want to talk to us, we can talk. But typically, they stay down for 3 or 4 hours, the medication wears off, and they go home that night in ordinary consciousness. 2 hours into it, tears coming down his face, he says something twice. Birth and death is a lot of work. Birth and death is a lot of work. After we spoke about what he was referring to, and he said that was the beginning of this journey within, seeing his cancer, seeing infinite reality, ultimate reality, and understanding that love was the answer. Love was everything. And he died an incredible passing. And his wife has been supportive of the research to this day. When he said that, I thought of a Zen saying we say in the monastery at the end of the day, and I'm going to close today with this saying. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes, and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Take heed. Do not squander your life. Thank you.